Hey, okay. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the weekly space hangout for Friday, June 5th, 2015. My name is Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and we've got our regular cast of heroes, and we've got a special guest this week. So we're going to be talking about, of course, updated images of Pluto and its crazy moons, what's happening with LightSail, what happened with the progress that went wrong, the restart of the Large Hadron Collider, and what's going on with the big telescopes in Hawaii, because that's going to take some clearing up. So joining us this week, we've got Jolene Creighton from Quarks to Quizzers. Hey, Jolene.
Oh, great to be here again.
I'm amazed that you came back another time. Ready for now? You're a seasoned professional, and you're ready. Kid gloves are off. We're ready to kind of take it to the next level, science it up. We got Morgan Rehnberg. Hey, Morgan.
Hey, Fraser.
And our special guest. So we got Stephen Fowler, who is the director of InfoAge and also works with the Science History Center in New Jersey. Stephen, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you guys see me, though?
We can see you and hear you. And let me say,
okay.
your control, your mastery of the mute button with so little training is really quite excellent. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. I have that down. And just to correct, I don't want to misrepresent. So I'm the creative director. Fred Carl is the director of InfoAge, and I would never want to take that title from him. He's one of the guys that came in early on, and I'll talk about him in regards to the museum when we cover that.
And so the reason you're here is to talk about the museum and the refurbishment of the telescope that you guys are working on. So can we talk sort of a bit about sort of what you guys are doing with the museum and the observatory that you're refurbishing?
Sure. So it's a long, weird New Jersey, as they say, type of story. I'll start out in the scope that you guys just ran a story yesterday on Universe Today, which was written by Nancy, by the way. I think it encapsulated the whole story, kind of gave a great perspective on how this came to be. But I'll start recently and then I guess move my way back. A few years ago, Princeton University reached out to InfoAge Science History Museum, which is a nonprofit that took over a National Historic Landmark a few years ago in the late 90s. And they're on the site. Part of the landmark is this large radio dish. It was built in 1958 by the U.S. Army and was used in as grounds control for TIROS 1 and TIROS 2, the world's first Earth-observing weather satellite, which was one of NASA's first successful projects and kind of gave them a big boost for bigger projects following that. But yeah, TIROS 1 and 2 in 1960, that was the ground control. So that we have this old dish. It's called TLM-18, and it was in use for almost 40 years. It had just been sitting there. And there's this huge dish. It's 60 feet wide, 60 feet high or so, capable of radio astronomy, just like any other radio dish that's made today. And it wasn't being used. And I guess Princeton University saw that, InfoAge and its members, OMARC is another organization that's in on that loop, Ocean Mammoth Amateur Radio Club. So InfoAge and OMARC have been looking for people with skills and talents to make something like this happen, and Princeton University stepped up a few years ago. So they had been working on it all this time. They installed a new motor drive and all kinds of things that they could probably talk to you at length about, very technical things. But they have the dish up and running, and then last January they did a scan of the Milky Way, which was pretty amazing. So I guess we're in the process of not only getting the dish up to par as an educational tool, but opening the building right next to the dish, which used to be the mission control for the dish when NASA was in charge. But we're renovating that, repurposing it as a small exhibit to the history of the site, and also a dish control with a classroom inside of it. So it would, you would have a historical dish being run by, technical expertise educators, Princeton University, for example, and you have a class behind them, behind the operators, following this whole process as it goes.
So, what was the state that the dish was in when you folks decided to actually sort of refurbish it and get it back to level of operations?
Sure. So, well, it had been laying in stow, just facing at the sky, straight at the sky for 30-some years. So there was rust and things like that to worry about. But Harris Corporation, they were kind enough to help fund a repainting of the dish. That happened in 2006. So I guess since the property was turned over, Fred Carl and a group of volunteers at InfoAge, and Omar included again. So it gives this consortium of different volunteers and nonprofit organizations stepping in to, bit by bit, as money is raised, to try to step in and at least stop things from falling down. Like they redid a lot of roofs on these historical buildings to, save it from the top down and then worry about what's going to go inside of it. And the same thing for this dish. The dish had been sitting there, it started to rust. They repainted it, and then the next step is finding someone to make everything work on the inside. So rust was about it.
It's strange to me how demanding people are of observatory time. People are trying to get in, all the various observatories, and especially a lot of the radio observatories, because a lot of science gets done with these kinds of observatories. That a dish that big was just sitting there, essentially in mothball, that no one was actually operational. As you said, it was able to take some images of the, do some scans of the Milky Way. It's a perfectly functioning radio telescope, right?
Yes, that's right. So I feel like there are so many more people that could speak to this better than I could. I'm more of the creative drive behind this project, but you're absolutely right
talk about that. So your role on the project. So how are you working on the project?
So I guess I'm kind of the guy that brought multiple parties together to actually implement the ideas that we've been talking about, and my role for the most part has been creative, and then I suppose on some levels project management. But the challenge had been, we have all these great ideas, and I don't know how many historical landmarks, if you've ever seen from the very beginnings to where they actually open to the public. There's this gray area in between that when a site closes down or is no longer being used as it was, and then by the 20 years later it becomes a public resource where people go and look at it. But that period in between, there's a lot of turmoil. Like you have volunteers, people taking their weekends off, or taking every weekday off and coming in and raking or repainting or trying to raise money to stop the buildings from falling down. So it's difficult to get these things to actually operate. So part of my role, I guess, was finding the money, getting people to help raise funds. We ran an online fundraiser last year, and we raised I think $6,000 or $7,000, and then we also have a Halloween fundraiser called Camp Evans Base of Terror that runs every October. And it sounds crazy, and it totally is. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. They have a Halloween fundraiser every October, and it's amazing. And the property's been there for a very long time, since the 1800s, and it's their single biggest fundraiser. And it basically keeps the place open so people could look at this incredible site. It was an old prison. Same thing for Camp Evans. So I'll give a little bit of background, I guess, on the site. First started with Guglielmo Marconi. He came in with the Marconi Wireless Company in 1912. He built several buildings, including a large hotel. The Army came in there a number of years later, in 1940, made it their top secret military base, Camp Evans Army Signal Corps base. And then, it had various impactful historical events that took place during that time as well. So it has this long history and there's a term in New Jersey we use because we are such a hodgepodge of different people's cultures, and it's a weird collection of things. So there's this term we use called Weird New Jersey. You guys might have seen the show on the History Channel, yeah, it is very weird New Jersey, Camp Evans. It comes from many different directions. So someone like me, going back to your original question, steps in and I try to gather for some of these organizations and get everyone on the same page. And Princeton University, to be honest, they've done an enormous amount of work on this. I really applaud, should really be given to them. Norm is one of the engineers at Princeton University who helped to get some of the motor drives and some of the bells and whistles on the inside working. And Dr. Marlowe, Dr. Dan Marlowe, he's the one that envisioned using this historical radio telescope to do modern day radio astronomy and observing satellites as well. So, so yeah, go ahead.
And so what's the state of the facility right now? So if I wanted to come and visit it, when will I be able to actually come and pay my entrance fee and check out the telescope?
Sure. So we had a soft opening in April, and we're actually going to have a grand opening in mid-August. I think the date is August 15th. It's on a weekend. It's on a Saturday. But at that point, that will be phase one of what we hope to be the InfoAge Space Exploration Center. So the dish will be operational for the public to see at that time. We'll have exhibits, some multimedia displays for people to look at what was once there. The site is it's nice too. It's in Wall Township. It's on a bluff overlooking the bay. There's a nice park right by the dish. So we're hoping over the next couple of years we'll make many additions to the exhibit inside and make it a destination for people looking to do a radio astronomy and to learn about it and to learn the history of the site.
And for those of us who have no idea about the geography of New Jersey, such as myself, if I want to get there, where do I got to go?
So this is right along the ocean. We're actually this is Bayfront on the Shark River Bay, on the Shark River Inlet. So if you've ever heard of Asbury Park, Bruce Springsteen, does that sound familiar at all? Asbury Park, Bruce Springsteen. We're about 10 minutes from where he played a lot of infamous shows at Stone Pony. Asbury Park is a popular destination. So we're like 10 minutes from Asbury Park, I would say. 50 minutes from New York City, 70 minutes from Philadelphia. About right.
So in addition to having public demonstrations and school groups visit and things, will amateur astronomy organizations be able to propose to make observations that will then be carried out with this telescope, or is it going to be purely a demonstration museum type piece?
No, absolutely. We are looking for partners in this. So especially if there's an organization or institution that wants to use the dish for certain experiments, we would absolutely be interested in entertaining that. We of course want to set aside a weekly period for the public to kind of have access to this, but no, absolutely, this is something we want to do big things with.
That sounds great. So, Stephen, I know you've got a run. So, maybe we'll get an update from you in August once it's live to the public and people can come.
I would love to come back on and show you guys where we are with this.
Great. And so, where can people find out more right now?
So, if you want to go, we want to learn a little bit more right now. I think the hub of communication right now for the museum is our Facebook page. So that is facebook.com/InfoAge Museum.
Okay.
So yeah, no, absolutely, you can contact us through there. I think we just posted the article on Universe Today that you guys did about the dish.
Yep.
So please do comment, and you can also reach out through us to that page as well.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks, Stephen, for joining us, and good luck with everything. And can't wait to sort of visit it in person next time I'm in New Jersey.
Next time you come down, we'll hook you up. All right.
That
we'll
sounds
give you
great.
the fan tour.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.
So just to remind everybody, this is a live interactive experience. I forgot to mention that part, that you can actually interact with us. So all you have to do is use the Q&A app. So wherever you're watching this video, there's a link at the bottom that says we're interacting with the public, and you click that, and you watch the video, there's questions, and I'm going to say hi to a bunch of people now that I forgot to say hi to at the beginning. Hugo Burnham, and Elad Avron, and Adam Synergy, and Stuart Rosenberg, and Stephen Hawkins, and Sev Dustbunny, and Matt Woods, and Nancy Graziano, of course, who helped organize this interview in the first place, Graham Ash, Tom Nathy, Guido Bibra, Tony Lynch, Linda Sadek, Gazelle Severin, Will Idoni, I think there's a few more. Gennady Romanov Chergovsky. I'm going to say it every time. Richard Clark and others. So thank you so much for joining us. So let's. I got a couple of pieces of news here to let everybody know. The one is that the Weekly Space Hangout has been nominated for a Parsec Award. Whoa. So congratulations, everybody, both the people who are in this, but also the people who, I really consider that community, the people that I just mentioned, they are the executive producers of the Weekly Space Hangout. And so, hey, executive producers, your show is up for a Parsec Award. So we'll give you more details as we actually submit our proposal and try to win. But congratulations. Of course, we won the Parsec Award last year for the Guide to Space, so I really don't hope I have to compete against myself. And if you do want to get involved in the community that surrounds the Weekly Space Hangout, I highly recommend that you go and go to the WSH Crew, which is a community on Google+. Just hundreds and hundreds of really dedicated people, and they really are, they are the executive producers of this show. They choose the stories, they choose the guests, they sort of figure out, what kinds of, even the kinds of how the show, the format of the show, and all that, and we really couldn't do it without them. So if you want to take more of a role in how the show gets made, join that community, and you'll have lots of people to talk with and help organize things. So thank you, everybody. Congratulations. But now we just have to win it. So, all right. What do I want to talk about first? I think I want to talk about actually Pluto. Pluto. Let's talk about the awesome tumbling, weird, crazy moons at Pluto.
That's right. So Pluto is now New Horizons is now close enough to Pluto to be capturing the highest quality images that we've ever had from Pluto. For a long time, the best images we had were from the Hubble Space Telescope, and it took a long time, almost 9 years, for New Horizons to get close enough to Pluto to be able to take better pictures than Hubble could. And already, even though we're 2 months or so, or a month away now from the flyby of Pluto, we're already getting great science from these pictures. And one of the most exciting things to come out recently was the realization that at least 2 of Pluto's moons, Hydra and Nix, are tumbling what we call chaotically. And what this is actually a specific mathematical and scientific term. And what chaotic motion means is that no matter how precisely you know the orientation and the rotation rate and the position of an object, you cannot predict very far into the future what location, prediction, or orientation, etc. it'll be in. And prior to the discovery of Nix and Hydra like this, there's only one place in the solar system that we knew of that had chaotic rotation, and that was Saturn's moon Hyperion. And Saturn's moon Hyperion is rotating chaotically because it orbits very close to the giant moon Titan. And the combination of Titan's gravity and Saturn's gravity, along with the strange shape of Hyperion, made it so that it was unpredictable which way the moon would turn at any given moment. And we have the same situation now here at Pluto. We have Pluto, but we also have its largest moon, Charon, which is about half the size of Pluto. So it's almost more like a binary system than a planet and a moon. And what happens is that the combination of these two gravities working together, along with, again, the unusual shape of these moons, means that every time the planet, or excuse me, every time the moon moves just a little bit, it encounters an unpredictable gravitational field and turns in an unpredictable direction. And so no matter how long we observe, and we've been observing Hyperion now for more than 150 years, we're not going to have enough data to be able to predict where these moons might be facing, say, a month from now.
So does that actually mean anything as far as the New Horizons mission goes? I mean, were we planning on getting any special data on these objects, and now we'll have to sort of readjust that because we can't predict where they're going to be or anything like that?
So it's good. It's a good question, and it's good to note that chaotic motion doesn't affect the orbit of the moon. The moon is always going to go in its same elliptical orbit, and so we're not worried about, say, New Horizons running into one of these moons because we can't predict where it is. But it definitely makes it more challenging to make observations because you can't make an observation and then know what part of the moon you're observing unless you have a picture that's actually of that same instant. And so sometimes we make observations, say a magnetic field observation or an observation where the object is too small to really resolve, and we know what side we're looking at because we've done enough research to have figured out exactly how the object moves over time.
But it gives them a bit of an advantage, right? With a lot of these flybys, they're concerned that they're only going to get a certain portion of the object that they're going to be able to look at. But now if it's going to have this tumbling chaotic motion, it may reveal a lot more of its surface than they would have anticipated if it was just rotating normally.
That's true. And so this is true of Hydra and Nix, but they also believe it's true of the other two smaller moons of Pluto that have been observed. And so all four of them are likely tumbling in this unpredictable fashion, and likely any other moons we discover in the Pluto system will be behaving in the same way.
And it's interesting because it's like these surprises, right? Like what's the most interesting part to me about this whole mission is not that we're going to get a close-up view of Pluto finally, all those kinds of things. It's that we're going to find a bunch of things that we never expected to see. And here's the first one, that these moons are doing something really strange and they're all doing it. And I'm sure that with this kind of observation, they're going to go back and look at Eris and its moon and potentially the kinds of moons that go around asteroids and start to say, do they all do this? Is this the most common behavior for satellite objects in the solar system? Right?
Yeah, for somebody who started doing science after Voyager, this is pretty exciting, and it must have been what Voyager was like in the 1970s and 1980s, because today the outlines of all the big ideas in planetary science have been established by Voyager, and we're really just going back and filling in details about this and details about that. But here we have an opportunity to really learn something completely new and completely unexpected for the first time. And that's exciting for the people on the team, for scientists in planetary science at large, and hopefully for everybody out there following along.
So just remind you, if you've got any questions, go ahead and ask them, especially about Pluto, for example. I've got one question that comes from Adam Synergy, which is that you wrote an article for about Saturn's G ring, and is there any sort of similar about the ring and its moon? Is it Aegeon?
I think it is Aegeon, and so Aegeon is much smaller than any of the moons we've yet discovered around Pluto. Aegeon is about 0.5 kilometer across. In fact, we wouldn't even officially term it a moon. At Saturn, we basically put the cutoff at about 1 kilometer across for moons, because otherwise you can pretty much define as many moons as you would like. And so they've looked really, really hard at Pluto to see if there's a ring around Pluto stemming from one of these moons. Because the way the G-ring forms around Saturn is tiny micrometeorites hit Aegeon and knock off dust. And this dust then spreads out around Saturn to form the G-ring. And certainly there's debris in space hitting Pluto and hitting Charon and hitting the other moons. And if a similar effect was happening where this dust was being knocked off and forming a ring, then that could be very damaging to New Horizons if it had to fly through it. And so for years now, they've been using first the Hubble Space Telescope and now New Horizons itself to look for these rings in every way they know. And so far we haven't found any. And that's disappointing as a ring scientist, but it's probably ultimately pretty good news for New Horizons, because it reduces the likelihood that they'll have to make some sort of last-minute maneuver or have an unfortunate encounter with a ring.
So another question here for you from maybe Romanev Cherengovsky. Are there any theories about possible life on Pluto or its moons, and could anything appear as New Horizons gets closer?
I'm not aware of any theories involving life on Pluto or any of its moons. Pluto is one of the coldest places in the solar system. In fact, it's so cold that there's only 3 elements that don't freeze at Pluto. But it is an active world, and we do have some indications that there might be some heat that is injected into the Pluto system, because we see its atmosphere change over time. It puffs up sometimes and it collapses down other times, and some of that heat comes from the sun, but some people believe that a lot of heat might be generated through tidal interactions between Pluto and Charon, the same way Io or Europa gets its heat at Jupiter, or Enceladus gets its heat at Saturn, could be happening, and that Charon could be a relatively active place that far out in the solar system because of all the heat it gets from Pluto stretching it in and out.
I mean, isn't the theory right now that, in fact, all of the large icy objects could very well have subsurface oceans generated through either tidal forces or radioactive decay? And, you know, I know that people have thought about a lot of the large moons, even things like Sedna and Eris and all that, even though they're incredibly cold, as long as you've got some kind of radioactive decay or some kind of thing going on inside, that you can get a surface of a subsurface ocean of liquid water, and wherever we find liquid water, we find life. But I don't think seeing Pluto from New Horizons, like, unless there's aliens waving as New Horizons goes past, we wouldn't be able to see anything. I mean, we've got spacecraft that have orbited Jupiter, orbited Saturn, and really seen these places up close. You know, they're moons, and hasn't seen anything. So, you know,
the hope is that you would see a plume over the surface of Charon or a plume over the surface of Pluto. But I think of all the places in the solar system, Pluto's not one of the high likelihood places to have a subsurface ocean, because you don't have a giant planet that could really tug you around and inject a lot of heat. Pluto is relatively small, and even though it's similar in size to Charon, it's not going to generate a ton of tidal heating. And the extreme cold, we're talking about hundreds of degrees below zero, you need a lot of heat in order to melt that ice.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. But this is exciting, and I mean, it's going to be the Pluto show from now until New Horizons makes its pass.
We're going to be on hiatus the whole time.
Well, maybe we should do a special episode just for that. I could be convinced to do that. All right, so let's talk a bit about the Large Hadron Collider with more power.
Hooray! So, as most of us probably know, the Large Hadron Collider has been offline for the last 2 years for scheduled updates. It discovered the Higgs in 2012, and then it was down for 27 months to get a whole bunch of new electricity and more power. And they just announced on June 3rd, so just a couple days ago, that it is back in action and actually started recording physics data, so collecting new information on physics and opening up some new frontiers in physics. The LHC is now twice as powerful as what it was during the last run. Ultimately, it's running right now with 13 TeV, that's tera electron volts of energy. 1 tera electron volt is equal to a trillion electron volts, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually a relatively small number when you think about it in comparison to other things. The CERN says that it's about the same, 1 tera electron volt is about the same as the amount of energy that's generated by a flying mosquito. So again, it's operating with 13 tera electron volts. It doesn't sound like that much, but what's notable about the LHC is that it's squeezing all of this energy into a space that's millions and millions of times smaller than a mosquito. So just the types of stuff it's doing is pretty crazy and insane. And it ran 6 bunches that had, I believe, 100 billion protons. So it ran 6 bunches the other day with 100 billion protons, and this was just the startup. So once it gets up to full power, I believe it's supposed to be operating with 14 tera electron volts, and it's going to be throwing around 2,808 bunches a day, which should equal out to about 1 billion collisions a second. And it's those collisions that are really what we're looking for, because we're talking about such high energy that when the particles smash together, they break apart, which allows us to observe them forming together in new and interesting ways, which could lead to a plethora of new discoveries. So
yeah. I mean, one of the things that's most fascinating to me is just sort of like how these particle colliders work, right? Because what they're doing is they're taking a particle, they are speeding it up to a significant portion of the speed of light, and by therefore increasing its momentum. And then the moment that they smash these particles together, the energy that is in the collision is then converted into matter. They are actually, because E equals mc squared, right? You're able to turn matter into energy, but this is the way that you turn energy back into matter, and then you get this cascading sort of breakdown of all these particles, and that's what gets detected. But what's happening, right, is they are literally forming particles at the moment of these collisions, and the more energy you get, the more mass of the particle you can create in the moment of that collision, and then the breakdown you get.
And so what we're hoping now with the new energy, because we could detect the Higgs, but ultimately the amount of energy that we were working with wasn't enough to let us really tell a whole lot about it. So hopefully the new operations will allow us to delve more into the Higgs, figure out more information about it, exactly how it operates. They're also hoping to uncover some things about supersymmetry. I know people are talking about dark matter, that maybe we'll be able to observe some type of something that's associated with that. And so there's a bunch of other things that we're looking for now that we can create heavier particles and elements.
So will it destroy the world?
No. It's also not going to make any black holes. I can't remember the exact numbers, what it is right now, but I mean, even if we did make a black hole, it would be so pathetically small that it would consume one atom like every, 100 years or something. So it would literally take, like the sun would turn into a red giant, it would burn the Earth away before this tiny, tiny, minuscule black hole even, consumed an entire dog. So
I think I had heard that according to Hawking radiation, like that it would have evaporated before it hit the ground.
Yeah,
you would have generated a black hole and it would have evaporated before it hit the ground. But this idea of these microscopic black holes. Like we see the supermassive black holes, we see the stellar mass black holes, but one of the ideas there's no size that a black hole has to be or amount of mass. You could have a black hole with the mass of the Earth, you could have a black hole with the mass of a dog, but the only forces that you could get those kinds of black holes created was shortly after the Big Bang, where the energies and the densities were so great that you could have these Earth-massed black holes or dog-massed black holes get generated. And at no other time could they be created. But the possibility is maybe these things are still kicking around from when the universe was formed 13.8 billion years ago. So, but it's not going to destroy the Earth.
No. So yeah, it's not like a tiny little black hole is going to come along, no. There's a bunch of other crazy theories about how it was going to. I can't remember them now, but there was a lot of chaos. And no, it's okay. Earthquakes, I think, was something. It was supposed to make earthquakes. It's not making earthquakes. We're okay.
Yeah, good. So, so you said they're going to go up to 14?
Yes, I believe that's what they're supposed to be vamping up to once it's all set and working at optimum efficiency, 14 tera electron volts. Yeah. And then the 2,808 bunches. So currently, the other day when they just started, so they just started collecting new physics, like actually collecting data. It only ran the 6 bunches, but 2,808 is what they're going to be doing eventually. So just tons of particles are going to be whipping around that track.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see the next sort of series of discoveries that comes out of this. All right, so Morgan, let's talk about LightSail. Has it come back to life?
It did come back to life. So last week we were talking about how a software glitch had basically frozen LightSail with a blue screen of death, unresponsive to any commands, and we needed to wait for a fortuitous reboot to happen to free it up and allow it to interface with ground control again. And that could have taken weeks or even months. But fortunately, it took just days. And earlier this week, controllers were able to get back in touch with LightSail and patch the issue in the software that had caused that flaw and continue on with the program of deploying the solar sail. But before they could deploy the solar sail, they had to deploy the solar panels, which fold in around the solar sail, kind of like the petals on a flower. And so they commanded, earlier this week, they commanded the solar panels to open. And it doesn't really seem like it's worked. And that's the trouble spot they're in right now. Is right after LightSail had launched, they received a notification, basically, that the solar panels had deployed. But they weren't supposed to have deployed. And so this has been interpreted as the panels were somehow jarred loose during either launch on the rocket or separation from the rocket when the CubeSat was ejected out. And they were jarred loose. That triggered the sensor, which told Mission Control the solar panels have been deployed when they weren't. And so they were able to activate a camera and take a picture of the interior of the satellite, and you can see it bright as day. And that's a problem because if the solar panels weren't deployed, it should be basically black inside. And so they think that somehow the solar panels may have been damaged during the launch and then either deployed and we're not sure about it, or they didn't deploy correctly. But either way, whatever this damage was, it affected the battery. And so right now, the battery doesn't seem like it's holding charge in the same way that it should. And this is holding up the deployment of the solar sail because the sail can only be deployed if the battery is fully charged. But right now, it's also caused them to once again lose communication with LightSail. The hope is that the solar panels haven't been completely damaged and we'll be able to slowly charge the battery back up. It may take a while to wait for that because right now LightSail is in an orbit that takes it behind the Earth so that the Earth's between the Sun and the satellite for a substantial period of time. But as time goes on, it'll actually spend more and more time into the Sun until it eventually falls into an orbit where it's constantly in view of the Sun. And that'll allow its solar panels to work a lot more efficiently, and hopefully that'll allow it to charge its battery back up. But once again, we're kind of on the clock because every day the orbit of the satellite decays a little bit as it experiences drag from the Earth's atmosphere. And so eventually, within the next month or 2 months, the satellite's basically going to fall back down to Earth and burn up as a shooting star. And so this means that we don't have forever to try and troubleshoot the issue. We have to hope that the battery either reconnects or is recharged or whatever the new communication delay is can be resolved sooner rather than later, and they'll still have a chance to deploy the sail.
So it turns out space is hard.
It turns out space is hard, and this is why you run a test mission like LightSail A is. This was entirely designed to shake out both the software and the hardware deficiencies of their design, and so far they've found a software and a hardware deficiency. And so from this perspective, the test is going exactly as it was designed to do, and they'll be able to adjust, make changes for the full-scale model that'll launch next year, and hopefully it won't suffer any of these problems.
And of course, I mean, we probably all know this, but it bears repeating that the number of times that things go exactly as planned far outweigh the number of times that stuff goes wrong. So even if this was, I mean, like, you know, we had obviously some problems with Rosetta and the lander there landing and bouncing and ending up having problems with its battery and generating power. But still, the number of times that thing goes right far outweigh the stuff that goes wrong. So.
And it's pretty impressive how well people can recover from these kinds of things. Like they were able to regain contact with the satellite. Now maybe they can pull off some more tricks to kind of get that battery filling back up and and then be able to get the solar sail deployed. So as long as they have that lifeline to the spacecraft, work can still get done.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's funny to see them fail, I mean, not fail, but go through these difficulties in public, and it's sort of very similar to what's been happening with SpaceX. SpaceX has been trying to land a rocket on that barge for months, and it's just still eluded them. But yet I think people are now a little more understanding think about like, okay, yeah, no, I'm expecting this to go sideways, and that's okay, and let's see another one, and you're going to fix all those problems in the next one, and you're going to keep going and going until you crack it, because fundamentally, all of this technology should work. The sail should deploy. It should be pushed by the light of the sun. It should be done in a fairly small package. This should all be possible. It's just a matter of realizing all these hiccups along the way. So
yeah, I think this is the fun part of LightSail, is because the Planetary Society is an advocacy and public outreach organization, they're making literally everything in this mission available. The data packets downloaded from the spacecraft can be received by ham radio operators. Once they're decoded, the contents of those are made public. Jason Davis, one of the employees over at the Planetary Society, has basically been live tweeting this for the last month. And so follow him if you want to get sort of the minute by minute, hour by hour, blow by blow of what's going on. And you really get a peek in at how complex even a very simple space mission like LightSail really is.
Yeah, nothing but support here. Keep it up, and we got your back. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the shenanigans with the big telescopes on Hawaii.
Right, so the 30-meter telescope is supposed to be constructed in operation by the 2020s. And when it goes live, it is going to be one of the most powerful land or space-based telescopes that we've ever had. It's going to be 10 times better spatial resolution than the Hubble Space Telescope at certain wavelengths, so longer wavelengths like infrared and so on. And ultimately, it's going to be 10 to 100 times better than every other telescope that came before, depending upon what telescope we're looking at specifically. This doesn't take into consideration the James Webb, which isn't supposed to come into operation until about 2018. And ultimately, the 30-meter telescope, because it's so large, because of it's really fine-tuned to help us understand the early moments of the cosmos. So it's going to help us take a look at what's known as the dark ages. So those are the moments when the first light started making its way across the cosmos. So it'll help us understand the very, very early history of the universe. Because it has such better spatial resolution, it's going to allow us to better understand how alien atmospheres work. So we have, thanks to Kepler, discovered thousands of exoplanets. And ultimately, the 30-meter telescope is going to help us better understand the atmospheres on these planets, better understand the large-scale structure of the universe. There's literally nothing in astronomy that the 30-meter telescope isn't going to allow us to do better. See clearer, see farther. It's just an amazing piece of technology. Super, super exciting. However, we ran into some problems in its construction. It's set to be built on Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And there are currently 13 telescopes already in operation there. The University of Hawaii leases 45 square kilometers of land from the state to run a bunch of different telescopes and observatories. And they encountered a number of protests from local individuals because this mountain is sacred to them, it's part of their heritage, and so they didn't want the telescope to be built there. There were actors from Game of Thrones who are from Hawaii who were tweeting about this, saying that they didn't want the observatory to be built or the telescope to be built. And so it created a whole big kerfuffle, essentially. Yet, there is some hope. They just announced this week that construction is going to continue. However, there are a couple of notable restrictions. First, as I said, the University of Hawaii leases 45 square kilometers of land. By the time that the 2030s come, that lease is going to be up. They're only going to be allowed to keep 5 square kilometers. They're going to have to give up 40 square kilometers. They're not going to be allowed to build on any areas that are not currently developed. So this is all part of this new agreement. Also, as I said, there's 13 telescopes currently on the mountain. 25% of them will need to be decommissioned before the 30-meter telescope, can go live. And what else? Oh, yes. The last thing is that per this new agreement, any visitors to the telescopes are going to have to go through a discussion that goes over the cultural significance of the mountain before they can go and actually visit this structure. So that's where we currently stand, but at least we're going to be able to start, construction and building and moving forward on this project. So.
Yeah, and I think Sandy joined us about a month and a half back, and really sort of explained the deeper cultural significance and the history of it, and sort of where things were at. And normally I will make all kinds of flippant comments, but she really had a good kind of deep think about sort of all the different parties involved and
also it's important to remember. I mean, so it sounds a lot of headlines went out saying that 25% of the telescopes will have to be decommissioned. It sounds really, really bad. But keep in mind, as I said, James Webb is set to be launched in 2018. The 30-meter telescope, we have this new telescope. A lot of these telescopes that we're talking about decommissioning were already set for decommission anyways, and perhaps we could have repurposed them for other uses. But there's a ton of new technology coming out, and so the blow to astronomy, the blow, in quotes, it really isn't that significant. So,
and I think that to I guess recognize the cultural heritage and the ownership of the people who have been living there and own the land. It's important to get them involved in decisions about how the land gets used, and we deal with this a lot in Canada, and we have a terrible history of it, and I hope we're getting a lot better now, which is just like have this conversation, and it's one of these things that space is so inspiring, and having this be really the finest platform for this kind of work almost in the world is something that the people of Hawaii should be really proud of, and of course they want to have a role in how this gets used. So I think this sitting down and having these negotiations really hopefully sets a new tone for what they're going to do as they move forward, and I hope that this is a place that maybe that they can take more involvement and more pride and more ownership of the science that gets done on their land.
And also, not to delve too far into the, but anyway, when the observatories started being built and all these telescopes started being built in Hawaii, it was the 1950s, 1960s, so we're really in, the moment of the civil rights movement, when historically non-white individuals were denied a number of rights. They had no voice, they had no power. So when we started building all these telescopes there really wasn't any thought, as you know, to these individuals, to their rights to the land. I mean, these people they lived there, and we just essentially went in. Also, in the various reports and opinions and op-ed pieces that I've read from astronomers and specialists who are working on this project, across the board, they have come out in support of these individuals, the concerns of the protesters. A lot of astronomers and scientists have said that, when they started reading about it, when they first heard about it, they're kind of, this is silly. But after talking with the people and really speaking with them, they essentially said exactly what you just said, that the history is really something that is questionable, and that moving forward together is really important, and they totally understand where they're coming from. So, the moving forward is great. It sounds like a good plan. As I said, it's not a significant blow to the technology. The people living there seem comfortable with where we're headed, so yeah.
And 30-meter telescope. That's just going to be awesome. That's such an quite an instrument. Okay, so Morgan, I think we have time for one more story from you, which is that we know what happened to Progress.
We sort of know what happened to Progress, and so you might recall that over the last period of months and even years, the Russian space program has struggled. They've had a series of high-profile failures, going all the way back to the launch of Phobos Grunt to Mars several years ago that failed to even get out of Earth orbit, and most recently, a Progress capsule bound with supplies for the ISS blew up on the launch, or the rocket, failed to deliver the payload correctly into orbit. About a month and a half ago. And so the Russian space agency Roscosmos conducted an investigation that was required by the Russian government to determine the cause of this malfunction, and they claim to have figured it out. And they released a press release that is kind of vague. And so what they say is that it's a design flaw in the coupling between the rocket and the Progress capsule. But they're careful to say that it's a specific they use the word specific numerous times in this report. And it makes it kind of ambiguous to see whether this was a design flaw across the whole line of rockets or whether something was incorrectly put together in this particular instance. That's been an issue with some Russian rockets in the past. The engineering and design of the rockets are fine. The workmanship actually assembling them is somewhat lacking. But whatever the underlying cause was, the result was that oscillations or sort of frequencies bouncing back and forth in this coupling caused it basically to jar loose and not release the spacecraft properly. And this set off a whole chain of events with progress that caused it to spin out of control and then to lose communication contact with the Earth and eventually to fall back and burn up in Earth's atmosphere. So they say they're developing a blueprint to ensure that this doesn't happen in the future. But again, it's not clear if that's altering the fundamental design of the Proton rocket or it's an extra safety check to ensure that this coupling is properly secured and damped appropriately.
Right, and then there was a Proton failure just another couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, this is again. I mean, I wonder how transparent they're. I mean, do you get a sense? I mean, you said their press release was pretty vague. Do you feel like that's what happened? You know, or are they spinning it? Do you think?
I don't sense a lot of spin here. I think that the Russian space program is certainly in some degree of disarray, and I think that they know that, and I think that it's gotten to the point where they can no longer fully hide that from the rest of the world. Their budget has declined, as has the budget of many space programs around the world. They've experienced some sort of a brain drain in which many of their talented engineers and scientists and technicians have left either to work in the European Union or to come work in the United States. And they are operating in an environment in which oversight is not as strict as it is in many Western space programs. And almost that's the most important part, because as we said with LightSail, space is challenging, and space is incredibly detail-oriented. I remember talking with Maven PI Bruce Jakosky a year or so ago, and he said there was more than 200 individual meetings that Maven had to go through before it could launch, and that they had to check off more than 10,000 items on a safety checklist in order to actually launch the spacecraft. And in theory, I'm sure that those sorts of things exist for the Russian space program as well, but unless you have people who are going to hold engineers and hold technicians to making sure that every item on that list is met and every meeting is conducted to the proper requirements, then you might as well not have the list at all. And you end up with many of the sort of simple assembly errors that have caused problems with the rockets in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's a very weird time because there's no, if the Russian program, gets canceled, or if the U.S. decides that they just don't trust that system anymore, there is currently no way to get to the space station. SpaceX is around the corner, but that is the way, the Chinese maybe, but that is the way people get to space, is on Soyuz rockets.
Right. It's definitely increasing the urgency of the need for Boeing and SpaceX to develop their crew transport systems. And so we've already seen NASA hand out one contract to Boeing for the first commercial human spaceflight to the International Space Station in 2017. We expect a similar contract to be awarded to SpaceX really any day now. And that still leaves us, at least a year and a half of gap between when we're facing these issues today and when American-built spacecraft will be prepared to deliver these crew in the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, when do you think that do you think it's inevitable that the Russians will stop launching people to the International Space Station? Do you think that's or launching American crews to the space station?
Yes, I think that once we have reliable, proven, American-built or at least American design technologies for getting people to the space station, that you'll see pressure politically, if nothing else, to send Americans to the space station aboard American ships. And that will certainly drain much of the demand for the Soyuz from the program, and of course that provides a substantial portion of funding for that sort of thing. And so a day may come where it becomes much more financially feasible for Russia to send their astronauts aboard the Boeing CST-100 or the SpaceX Dragon capsule, as opposed to on their own Soyuz capsule. But they also have the same political pressure to use Russian-built equipment to send Russians to the Russian portion of the space station. And the question will basically come down to whether the financial and technical arguments win, or whether the political and public image arguments win.
Well, but they're also... Oh, go ahead, Jolene.
I was going to say, I'm just laughing because the International Space Station is supposed to be this, I mean, obviously not a human collaboration because Chinese and other nations are obviously being left out of the equation, but you have all these problems, always comes back to the politics and the nations, and we just can't escape.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the Russians have already done a little bit of saber rattling about taking their toys and going home, which is that they've said, you know, they're going to fund it through, I forget what it was,
2024, I believe.
2024, and then they may very well disconnect their modules from the space station and have their own space station. And I guess they're going to resupply their own space station with their own Soyuz rockets. And that I think is the wrong response to this situation, right? Like, if their space program is in crisis, the way you don't double down on the crisis by disconnecting from your friends, disconnecting your stuff from the space station, and then only using your own rockets to do this. You acknowledge that you have an issue, and you seek a way to solve the problem, and be very well. You put your people on Dragon capsules. I mean, you know, I think that's perfectly acceptable. So it's too bad. I think Jolene, you're exactly right. It's just too bad that the politics are taking such a front seat to this.
Yeah, certainly in light of the fact that China and India are going to be making very large investments in their space programs in the coming years, I think Russia will find it a very lonely place to go it alone in both human spaceflight and scientific space exploration. There's no sign that NASA and the European Space Agency won't continue their close partnership. And so if Russia's going to want to remain relevant, they either need to join with one of these other space programs or make a much more substantial investment into the program. And that seems like something they're probably not terribly well placed to do right now.
And as an aside, Brian Koberlein from One Universe at a Time actually had a pretty good podcast this past week on how, in the United States specifically, science is becoming more and more politicized. We're not funding research to see where the research leads, but you know, looking at this as a political issue. Anyway, just it sort of reminded me of what we're talking about here with Russia and the International Space Station and America and funding and all this stuff. So it's an issue across the board, even, you know, within individual nations itself. So.
Look at this. Even when Brian Koberlein's not on the show, we're promoting him. Okay, well, let's start wrapping things up. Okay, so Matt Woods noted, he says, it's unacceptable that the Weekly Space Hangout and Astronomy Cast are going on hiatus. Do you think about us poor Southern Hemisphere people freezing our asses off? No, it's hemisphere discrimination, I tell ya, lol. So, yes, Matt, this is how it works. I apologize that I live in the Northern Hemisphere. I can't help it. This is where I was born. But okay. Here's what I offer. Weekly Space Hangout fans and crew. If you guys want to do something special for the New Horizons, I am in. Let's do something. So I will talk. Let's talk on the Weekly Space Hangout crew community, and let's figure out something that we can do.
At least Amy will be at the New Horizons headquarters, mission control, during the flyby.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that we know that we could talk to. I've hosted 2 hangouts just with the science, some of the science team from the New Horizons mission. I'm good friends with Alan Stern and other people on the project. So, and we did our live coverage of the Curiosity Hangout the Curiosity landing, and that went great, and it was a lot of fun. So I would be glad to do something like that. So let's talk. Let's talk, and we'll figure something out. That is the olive branch that I am handing out when I'm sitting on the beach, enjoying the nice warm weather here, and you're freezing.
I mean, that's a thing there. It really
Nice warm beaches.
nice weather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. There you go. We're supposed to hit 30 degrees tomorrow here.
Huh.
Which is not right. That's in Celsius, which is a lot, by the way. It's like 95 degrees in Fahrenheit in ancient, archaic ways of measuring temperature. Okay, cool. So let's give people a chance to find out more. So, Jolene, where do people find out more about you and your wonderful website?
From quarks2quasars.com is our wonderful website where we post videos from Minute Physics and Vertasium and stuff like that, all those awesome people doing awesome work. Also, a number of different artists who are doing work in the sciences. We're supposed to have an interview coming up with Robot Hugs, who does a lot with mental issues and how all that works. We also post articles on science, news, and research. So that's our main thing, but we do a lot of other stuff as well. So from quarks2quasars.com, same basic name on Twitter, Google+, and Facebook and Tumblr. So.
And Morgan, where do we find out more?
Oh, well, tonight you can come see me at Astronomy on Tap in Denver. I'll be talking about how much it might cost to buy a beer on the planet Mars. You can check out my first full-length blog entry over at sen.com, where I talk about how Cassini is leading the way in finding plumes elsewhere in the solar system. And, of course, as always, you can find me at Morgan Rehnberg on Twitter and morganrehnberg.com.
Were you going to stick around and answer some questions after this?
I think I can manage that. That'll be over at the Google Plus Space community, which is plus.google.com. Click on Communities and choose Space.
So one sort of thing to let you know about, I'm going to be at ComSciCon in 2 weeks from now, and I'll actually be in Boston. So one, if anyone's in Boston, they want to hang out, let me know, and we can try and figure something out. I'll be there for 3-4 days over the weekend. And big thanks to Morgan for submitting my name and getting me on the list of panelists. And I'm actually going to be able to talk to the people from Minute Physics. We're going to be on a panel together, so it's going to be awesome.
And simultaneously, Sandy and Amy Sherra-Teitel and I will be in Berkeley that same week. So if anyone's in the Berkeley area and would like to get a beer, drop one of us a line.
That's awesome. And so we're going to try to do the Weekly Space Hangout from the show. I will try to do
positions.
Yeah, so I'll try and do it from afar, and we'll see if we run into any technical issues, but we'll stay tuned. So once again, I'm Fraser Cain, FCain on Twitter. Go ahead and follow me. It's the right thing to do. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this YouTube feed, wherever the subscribe button is. Sometimes it's over there. It's all reversed. I forget. So thank you so much, and thanks to Stephen for joining us as a special guest. Thanks to Jolene and Morgan for joining us today's show, and thanks to all of you for watching and for helping us get nominated for a Parsec Award. Now we just have to win. So thanks everyone. We'll see you all next week.
See ya.